Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special functional forum. I'm really excited to bring a critical topic here and gathered some of my favorite practitioners from across the country to discuss a topic that I think is really timely. Joining me today is Dr. Mark Holthouse, who I've known for more than a decade, is practicing in Idaho and part of an amazing team bringing functional medicine to the masses there. I got Dr. Gio Espinosa, who was one of the original Functional Forum legends from when we were in New York and is an integrative neurologist and urologist and has a lot to share on men's nutritional, biochemical health, as well as a range of other areas. And my friend Dallas Hartwig, who you may know from the Whole30, but has done an incredible recent book called The Four Seasons Solution, and is now diving more into men's mental, emotional health. This is live, so if you have questions, you can go to #FunctionalForum and you can ask questions there. I'll be keeping track as we move along. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining me here this evening. If you're joining from one of the meetup groups, feel free to send in some of the message. So this is Men's Health in Crisis. And maybe just as we start the conversation, I've got some stats here that men are dying younger and more likely to successfully commit suicide than women. Men are 3 times more likely than women to die from injuries, unintentional injuries, suicide, and homicide. Men of all ages are less likely to seek medical care and less likely to comply with medical instructions. And men have higher relative death rates from heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, liver disease, kidney disease, pneumonia, and accidents. All of that contributing to a marked difference in life expectancy and moving quickly in the wrong direction. So maybe as an initial starting point, just to get some of your ideas, let's do a quick round on, Mark, maybe I'll start with you. What do you think is driving these terrible outcomes in men's health here in America?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it kind of reductionistically with looking at biochemistry, or my personal belief is that it's a cultural crisis that is men at the apex and the crosshairs right now. And without getting political or too social culturally in the rabbit hole, I think personally that a lot of it has to do with, where we've come from an evolutionary perspective, from a hunter protective hard wiring to where men are in this current culture, and the lack of leadership and camaraderie and networking that men had around the campfire historically, where they were older men mentoring younger boys into manhood and what a true man means, how they're supposed to be protecting and how they're supposed to be servicing the rest of their community, their immediate family. And I think with the loss of that, in addition to endocrine disrupting chemicals, I think we're seeing largely what we're seeing now.
Gio, you've had a history in urology, but I know you have a holistic perspective from being a naturopathic doctor. What do you see?
Well, it depends on what phase of a man. So I typically see men clinically and with my social media, my digital work that are probably 50 years old and older. But I sort of mentor some that are much younger than that. So, and I have a son who's 12. So I'm looking at the full spectrum here as to what's actually happening. And I mean, we could be on here for a long time. I think there's a lot of different elements to it. One of the things, however, is that I think that is perception, the perception of the male, let's just say any phase of their life, as to, as Mark said, what is it to be a man, right? We are in a situation now where, younger men particularly are just confused about that. What is it being a man, right? That plus perception on the definition that we give to things, right? So definition we give to things like what? Like money, what money means. When you look at, in one of my intake forms, when we say, well, what are your top stressors, right? And I have, finance, relationship, money always comes up top. And even in men that I know have a lot of money, by the way. So it's not a scarcity of money, but they have a scarcity mentality, or how they define money in their life and what it means to them, right? Something that they sort of keep or whatever, what have you. which leads to many stresses, which leads to oversympathetic stimulation. So sympathetic nervous system is always stimulated, which then leads to a bunch of other problems, including prostate problems, because the prostate is 40% muscle, smooth muscle. So it's not just glandular, it's 30 to 40% smooth muscle. And like any smooth muscle, it tightens when you have oversympathetic stimulation. Mm-hmm. So what happens? They tighten up. What happens? You have a small prostate. It's always BPH. Well, it's not an enlarged prostate. It's tightening up. It's tightening up around the urethra, the area that brings out the urine. And that leads to other things, which then leads to hormonal imbalances. It's not about testosterone; it's about the balance and the ratios of testosterone and with other things, which then leads to poor quality of life and things like erectile dysfunction. That creates problems in relationships and in a man's how a man feels about themselves. So it's all connected, and I think that we're missing the boat when a man comes in and we just hyper focus on just labs and trying to treat each thing biochemically. I think we need to look at it holistically. I think we need to have better conversations with men. And I think we need to also, one more thing is look at their alcohol consumption. You'd be surprised if you ask the question, how many men have alcohol issues and that they need to either stop or seriously consider reducing the amount that they consume.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
Dallas, I know you have an 11-year-old son too, so you're seeing the gamut. And I know that some of what Mark and Gio said, I'm sure is resonating with you. I can see that. And what are some things that you'd like to add into the mix here?
Well, Mark, I was thrilled to hear you kind of take that evolutionary perspective, because that's very much how I think about it too. And the model, the modern model for men is protect and provide and potentially procreate. But I think about that as a fairly sort of immature masculine perspective. And so a lot of men have been culturally conditioned to kind of stay in that fairly immature mode and actually disincentivized from kind of maturing beyond that space, where they, instead of focusing on all of the external and physical things, to your point, Gio, about the financial concerns, we get so stuck on those external things, and we forget that there's a whole world inside of us that we were actively discouraged from getting to know. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of my work as a men's coach is working with men and actually helping them find out, like, what is inside of me, what has been there forever, and what is new, and what is cropping up, and what is expanding, and what is growing, and what. So I think sometimes it's a function also of recognizing that there's stages, the sort of archetypes in a man's maturation. And, obviously the foundation of physical health is built really around a lot of the survival needs. So I think about everything from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs perspective. And so much we focus on the physical needs part of it, the food and the sleep and all that stuff. And we kind of forget that there is a whole rich, beautiful psychospiritual realm built on that foundation, and men, culturally speaking, are discouraged from exploring that realm. So I want to kind of beat the drum of encouraging men to understand themselves, to understand relationships, to understand their life history, and to kind of lean into that psycho-emotional space. I mean, 40% of men said they wouldn't consider speaking to a mental health professional unless they were suicidal. So there's a pretty significant sort of stasis or repulsion from even talking to people about what's happening inside of them, so that men are very isolated and very alone, and still very much having these wide array of physical and psychological symptoms and struggles, whether it's depression or anxiety or chronic stress or whatever, and they're alone in that struggle. And Mark, to your points about sort of the band of brothers, group of hunters kind of thing, like that's a thing that I think some young men have, maybe on a sports team or in college or with their drinking buddies or the guys that get together and watch football with when they're in the 20s. But that goes away pretty quickly when men go into their 30s and 40s and 50s. Mm-hmm. And, they'll get the colleagues, the coworkers that they'll hang out with and talk shop with, but that's not the same as somebody supporting you really in the trenches of hard life. So I think that's the piece that I'm most interested in and most passionate about these days, is sort of connecting the dots and not just facilitating, but actually actively encouraging men to lean into those spaces, because we all have those spaces inside of us. And not enough people are saying like, hey, that's a good thing. It's a manly thing. It's a masculine thing to explore. And that's what I've been saying for a while.
Mm.
Well, I really appreciate all three of your perspectives, and I'd love to like dive in a little bit further into that. I mean, what I'm getting from all three of you is that this isn't going to be solved in a 15-minute, doctor visit, right? And this is the evolution of medicine. We're talking about how medicine's going to evolve and has to evolve to solve these kind of areas. Mark, the last time you were on the Functional Forum, you're part of the Functional Medicine Idaho team, and you're building a structure where you can really scale access to functional medicine, both physically with multiple locations, but also, with insurance. And now my understanding is you've had a chance to actually build from scratch a sort of a center to really, design men's health in a new way. And given how you set up this, your first piece here, I'd love to learn how you have organized care now that you see men's health in that way, maybe without the shackles of insurance, or without, with actually dedicating something specifically to men's health.
Yeah, it's really, we started off with a concierge hybrid model, I think, James, when you were in town a few years ago. And really we're the only ones left, I think, in the Treasure Valley of southwestern Idaho doing insurance-based functional medicine at the scale. I think we got 27 practitioners now.
Wow.
We have 4 of us that branched off into a separate entity called the Center for Optimal Health, which is a parent LLC, or I should say it's under a larger organization. It's cash only. And we did that so that we could use things like peptides and testosterone optimization outside of the confines of FDA and Endocrine Society guidelines, which in my opinion, and people like Abraham Monkeller at Harvard are fairly antiquated. So I felt like we needed to, divorce ourselves from the confines of insurance, medical necessity, ICD-10s, based on FDA guidelines and radiations, which really are confusing and at best don't make a lot of sense to a lot of us. So we could practice freely and truly work for the client as opposed to working for the insurance companies. And it's been an amazing experience in the last 2 years, where, instead of seeing, higher volumes of clients, we're seeing a lot fewer folks that are amazingly committed, that have been through the gamut of other practitioners and end up filtering down to us to address these specific kinds of needs. And what I'm finding is that instead of getting the traditional drive-by TRT clinic clients, so there are plenty of those, we're seeing people that have kind of come through that and want something more, or who never went there and are looking for something more. And so they're having to address their thyroid, their cortisol, their alcohol consumption, their toxic burdens, and they're having to address what it is that they're feeling about their place, their identity, what it means to be male in this society at a much deeper level to address root cause. And so that's allowed us the access and time, which is the vanishing commodity, as you know.
Yeah. Is there a certain type of practitioner that you've got on the team to get into the psychospiritual stuff?
So I wish that I had someone like Dallas now. And now that I've made his acquaintance, we need to talk, my friend, because that's exactly the kind of person that I would love to have to refer to and to augment what we're offering. But right now, I mean, we're really relying heavily on exercise physiology. We're on nutritionists that are functionally trained, and health coaches, all of which are for the most part women, right? And I love my women. I do a lot of female care as well as men's health. Um, However, I'm in need of somebody like that that can address these deeper things, and I try to do it with the time that I have. But we do have a team approach. There are some counselors in the area that get what we're doing, that aren't just all about addressing trauma only, but do some of these other cultural and deeper men specific types of discussions. Most of the guys that I've talked to are getting involved, that are successful, are getting along with accountability and groups that they've become involved with. And I have been kind of the recipient of the education. They're teaching me more than I've ever taught them about what it means to have a sense of community with men. And it's a wonderful thing because they're better husbands for it, they're better fathers for it, and their affect, their physical health is improved because of it. So I'm finding that actually it's outside of my caregiver team that this piece, this missing piece, which is more of the societal roles that I mentioned earlier, I think are missing that they're getting help with.
Well, look, I was wondering how long it was going to take until we talked about men's groups, because like I'm sure if you've followed the functional forum, you've listened to watched my newsletter for years, you're like, James is always talking about his men's group, because it has been transformative for me. Dallas was one of the main reasons why I ended up there. You know, we in 2019 spent a weekend at his house and realized like that's what I needed in my life. And I'm super grateful, Dallas, for guiding me in that direction, because it's been transformative for me. And you know, I want to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it anyway. I'll ask you guys there. But like, so I joined this group. It's not a medical group. It's really there for accountability, support, connection. But one of the things that's happened over the 5 years that I've been part of it, first of all, it was a lot of working out my stuff, right? I came in with real needs, and there was emotionally support, you know, mature men to support me in that journey. But the thing that I've noticed over time is that, one, all the people that have been in there since I've been in there longer, for 5 years, their lives are working out a hell of a lot better than when they came in, me included. So I'm like seeing that, and you, to your point, Mark, as you're a husband and as a father and as a business partner and all these different areas. But I would just say in the last year and a half, as our group has got super solid, there are men who have come into the group that, in my judgment, are mentally ill, right? Or on that journey, or on the sort of like pathway towards that. And one of the most incredible things that I've seen in the last year is quite rapid turnaround from just someone like, I think, being able to come into a group, be themselves, realize there's some safety, be themselves, and actually, you know, not get advice, but actually just be in the presence of other men making good decisions for themselves and doing it. And it's funny because the universe has brought us, like, I would say, tougher and tougher cases, and the group is just, you know, really, really amazingly worked to it. And there's no money changing hands, and it's completely outside of the medical system and all these kind of things. And I've been saying, I guess, recently that I feel like there's a new standard of care coming in functional medicine, or whatever this new medicine is going to be called, where they're like, safety and connection and accountability is the group, and that's what's driving the structure. And then providers like Mark and Geo, who are amazing at individualizing treatments, can come in and sort of tweak the protocol, whether that be medication, whether that be nutrition or otherwise. And, you know, I don't know if that's going to happen in men's health because of the reasons that you said. And the reasons you said, you know, it's like, will men actually want to be part of a group? And I think there's a huge, you know, like it's not aspirational to be in a group. It's not cool. It's not sexy. It sounds like AA. But ultimately, when I've seen the results that I've seen, I think it's a necessary component. And you could either build that into your clinic system and hope that you can convince men that this is cool and that it should be part of it, or you've got to have resources, like you said, you know, outside. Gio, I wonder how the New Yorkers deal with, are the New Yorkers into the men's group, or is this just a country thing?
It's primarily a country thing, but it's okay. No, I think they are. Look, I want to touch on something you said, James. You said something about motivating men to kind of join such groups. I think that I've given up on motivating men a long time ago because that just never worked. I just found that there's enough motivated men out there that are actually just looking for us. So it's a matter of us connecting with them. Right? Motivating men, the motivating aspect is like, maybe, I don't know, maybe go to a weekend seminar with Tony Robbins. That's not my role. And I think that that's probably not the role of, you know, the experts here. There's a lot of men looking for answers. There's a lot of men, you know, looking to living life in all cylinders, trying to, you know, trying to have it all, which I think that's perfectly fine for us to continue on this journey on how we can be better at all the elements that are important to our lives. Fathers, husbands, business people, providers, and and at the same time, not sacrifice our own health. So I think enough New Yorkers are waking up, where, I see a lot of Wall Street guys, as you can imagine. And those guys, they are still, they do still have the golden handcuffs on for sure, but they're thinking differently. And I tell you, their behaviors are not as, or at least the guys I see, maybe because I'm in a homogenous environment where if they see me, they're health conscious at minimum. But they're not just working hard and after work, just, going to the bar and knocking down 10 whiskeys. The younger generation are also more health conscious, actually. Millennials are, and then the next generation under them are as well. They're way more health conscious than they were before, and they think work-life balance. I mean, we have residents at NYU that are talking work-life balance, and everybody's looking at it like they're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? You're a resident. You're supposed to work 80. And honestly, I'm not mad at them. And changes are happening because they're saying, I'm not coming in today. We're all trying to figure it all out, but at least it's starting a conversation as to, how can we have it all, right? How can residents work 60 hours a week, not 100, and still get the same results, get the same experience that they need? And they're rested, and they actually seen patients when they actually feel healthy and, rested and rejuvenated and so forth. So I think New Yorkers, I think in New York is a reflection of what's happening, not only nationwide, but globally, as to health consciousness. But in men, it's a matter of, what do I do? Where do I go? So it's really a matter of us all connecting with each other.
Yeah. I'll tag on to that. Something that came up for me, Gio, as you were speaking, is about the motivation piece, and I loved what you said. I also don't motivate men either to engage with some sort of practitioner or even engage in their own process individually. I like BJ Fogg's model for behavior change, and he's really simply, he talks about behavior change happens when there's the right combination of motivation, of ability, and the right trigger or cue. So I think, motivation, to your point about Tony Robbins, like, it's a highly transient thing, and it's very difficult to instill in somebody else. But my role, both in my past work with the Whole30 and in my current role, really focuses around the ability piece of that. So it's providing supportive resources and occasionally being the right prompt for them to take certain steps, but mostly it's supportive resources. And that, whether that is, books, therapist recommendations, men's group resources, sometimes I'm the resource, whatever it is. But I think that you're spot on with that, about the motivation really not being the thing. And that if men are not yet at the place where they are internally motivated, they might not be ready. And that's okay, because there are tons and tons and tons of men who are. And those are the ones that I think all of us focus on.
Yeah. I'd love to get all of your thoughts on this question, because you said, well, where should people go? And I'm just wondering, if you look at the history of the functional, integrative, naturopathic movement, a lot of it has been delivered squarely to women, right? If you even look at some of the bigger franchises, so Body Logic MD, there was a lot of hormone clinics where they were like, let's have a specific thing designed for women. And even if you look now, when I've helped lots of doctors start their functional medicine program, it's like, who's your target market? And then it's like the 50 to 70-year-old woman, or the 30 to 50-year-old woman, or maybe it's infertility, or maybe it's in menopause. Menopause is just out of control on the internet right now. Just as far as a niche that seems to be everywhere. Maybe it's just because of my age, but I see it everywhere, and I think it is everywhere. I'm wondering, what is the potential of men's health focused clinics across the country? Is there the demand there for it? Are we still a little bit ahead of the curve? And what will it take for I guess what would it take for there to be real access to a flavor of men's health that would encompass many of the things that you've spoken about?
I think the buying behavior, if I may start, is it all right if I
Go for it.
Yep.
I think the buying behavior is just different in women than men and men. I think that for men, and I've dealt with men for 25 years at a professional level, and I just see what their patterns are, and then I just notice my own patterns. So like, ooh, they're not that different than my patients. Wow, what a coincidence. Which is, it'll take me a while to get in because I need to verify and then verify and then verify a little bit more. And once I'm in, you're my guy, right? How many times do we use that language? Yeah, go to my guy. My guy's the barber. My guy, that's it. But women tend to, and it's based on what I've seen with now, adult daughters that I have, and you know, spouse, and it's they kind of go in quicker, but they don't stay in. They bounce around. They go to different people, right? So there's no loyalty. Men are loyal, but it will take a while for them to come in, and then build that relationship. Men value relationship with everyone, particularly with their doctors, lawyers, accountants, and so forth. The relationship matters a lot. So I think it's there, and also there's not a lot of hoopla on the internet because it's not really what we do. And it's not really what works anyway. In fact, the more I see a lot of jazzy things, I run away from that, right? But if you tell me, James, hey, you got to go see my guy Dallas, who does his this network thing, and it's a trusted source. You're a trusted source. That's one verification. Maybe I get another one. Mark tells me, yeah, Dallas is great. Now I'm with Dallas, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in, and that's it, right? So, and this is not an internet decision making. This is just word of mouth and on trust and things like that. So I just think we function a little bit different. I don't think we're gonna. I think you're gonna see a lot of more glitz going on as it relates to men's health, but I don't think that really works.
James, to answer, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I totally agree with that. I've been approached, and Gio, you probably have as well, by these men's health franchises, right? They're popping up everywhere. We just had one here in Oregon, and then also in East Boise, that are, my owner came to me all concerned and said, wow, this is direct competition for our cash model. And I said, let me look at the website. Let me shop this a little bit. Let me pretend I'm a client. In fact, let me pretend I'm interested in an employee as a potential franchisee. And what I've learned when I've done any just preliminary research into some of these more glitzy organizations whose business model is selling shots or pellets. I do both of those things, but it's a piece of what we do. It's not the whole of what we do. And I think where they're going to miss the boat is exactly what you said. And it's exactly why a lot of guys aren't going with the telehealth model as quickly as we might have thought on these topics. They want that relationship. They want a relationship where they can come in brick and mortar. And I'm 90% tele, but I'm saying a lot of my guys, this is what they prefer. So every 8 weeks, I'm flown from the Oregon coast where my home office is, and I'm doing this all day, and I'm doing a week of clinic in person for new consults, establishing relationships, and oh yeah, a crap load of pellets. However, I think that they are truly looking for not either or, but and. They want the relationship, they want the contextual holism, but they also want to feel better. Totally agree with the loyalty issue. That they're slower to adopt, but man, once they've, you have them. And then you have to almost talk them out of, well, no, you should really think about this. Go research this. No, but you said to do it. No, you really need to research this. And yeah, so the loyalty runs very, very deep. Not that I don't have amazing, loyal, and bright, intelligent female patients that seek out my care, but there's truly a difference. Women are not just little men, and men are not just large women. We are so physiologically different in the way our behavioral neuroplasticity and the way we change behaviors and comply and engage. Couldn't agree more.
Thank God that we're so
right. It'd be a pretty boring world.
Oh God. I always tell my wife, I would have never married me. What are you complaining about?
What were you thinking?
So I'd love to get your take on this, because I know, your role has changed. I know historically you did a lot of like strength and conditioning, PT stuff, functional medicine, and now like really in sort of like a men's coaching role. And I'd love to just get your take on, one of the things that we spoke about earlier this year that I was really taken with was just an extension of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and some of those like higher level areas that men need to be challenged on, I guess, or need to like focus on. Do you want to jump into some of that?
Sure. I kind of alluded this earlier, but men often find themselves feeling like a small cog in a very big machine, and that feeling of insignificance, not necessarily to people in your immediate vicinity, but kind of on the larger scale. It's hard to feel like you're contributing to something that matters when you spend your day in a cubicle in front of a screen, making ones and zeros move around for somebody you'll never meet. There's not a lot of human significance in that. And that's the story of a lot of men in this world. And we talk a lot about purpose. We talk a lot about men not having a sense of purpose, not having a sense of identity, not having a place to belong. And as we all know, the sense of belonging is a very profound intrinsic human need. And when the world is so large and we are aware of how large it is and how small we are, it's hard to find that sense of purpose sometimes. And sometimes a lot of the work that I do when I'm coaching men is helping them to identify either what that purpose already is that they are either kind of living out or living into, or potentially not. And sometimes it's a function of figuring out what larger thing they actually want to contribute to, that they feel compelled to contribute to. And invariably that's some variation on, friends, family, local community, sometimes small business. It's almost never multinational corporations or shareholders. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of that sense of scale. And, as you guys have alluded to, men really like that physicality, the physical proximity, the eye to eye, the face to face, and sometimes the shoulder to shoulder interactions. And when we don't have enough of that, A, because we're overscheduled, B, because we're financially stressed, C, because if we have families, we've got lots of stuff going on there, and there isn't much space in the world as it's built, the way as it functions for anyone, including men, to spend time with themselves, to get to know themselves, and then to share those deep parts of themselves with someone other than their partners, which sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't even do a great job of that. But it's pretty uncommon that men do a great job of doing that with multiple other people, significant male friends, larger friend circle. So a lot of my work is in helping men find their way into that space where there is a sense of contribution and belonging. And that speaks to the kind of hunter aspect of men, the sort of providing, protecting energy, which we carry all the way through our lives. But that's only a part of this thing, right? Is that men also have this rich inner world that a lot of us have been for our whole lives largely out of touch with. And so a lot of my work is in helping men recognize, yes, they want to, engage with that external physical world in a really meaningful way, but there's this entire world inside of us that so often is ignored, repressed. We're ashamed of it. We don't even know it's there. We sort of we look away from it at every opportunity. And there's a natural maturation process that goes on there of kind of getting a handle on the outside world, which includes the physical body. And so, of course, like all the basic physical health stuff that we do in functional medicine is super relevant there. And there is this natural progression that happens when there's some threshold crossed there somewhere and the physical health has been addressed to an adequate degree. I mean, I saw this with people doing the Whole30 program, which is simply eat different food for 30 days. There's no psycho-emotional, spiritual direction there. There's no physical activity. It's just different food. And in making that one very short-term, very limited change, people spontaneously started going back to grad school or writing music again or ending their toxic relationship or like getting into all of these other areas outside of just their physical health. And that happened spontaneously. And so I think a lot about cutting away the anchors that keep men small and static, because humans are spontaneously beautifully buoyant when we sort of cut away some of those anchors, and they can get up into those more interesting spaces of who am I, where do I belong, what's my contribution, what's my purpose, what lights me up, because a lot of men have no idea what that is.
Yeah. Well
Do you
said.
think a woman can activate that for a man, like a woman health coach, or do you think that has to be another man for that to really work?
I think that there can be women who can do a really great job of helping men address the sort of foundational, again, going back to Maslow's hierarchy, right? The sort of physical survival needs. Women can do an excellent job with that. Once you start getting into the spaces of what's inside of me, how do I work, what matters to me, I think that on average, a male practitioner or guide or coach or whatever is much more qualified to do that. Not just because they understand it better, but because men trust them more. It's a different kind of relationship. So it's, that's general. I think there's some amazing female therapists and coaches, but I think for the most part, having men, sort of the band of brothers, men's group, men beside you, shoulder to shoulder, and then intermittently having a man in front of you, whether it's an individual or, ideally there's also this growing group of elders that we don't have much of in society. There's, I ask men all the time, I'm like, how many men do you know personally in your world that who are above the age of 60 or 70 that you really aspire to be like when you're older? And men say 0, or occasionally they'll say 1. And so the group of elder men is something that's really lacking. And I'm hoping over the course of of the coming decades, we can start to have more men like you, James, who are engaging with your rich work, who become that group of elders for my son's generation. He's 11. When he's 20 and 25 and 30, I want a group of elder men to be able to guide him in a way that I, as his father, can't necessarily do.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I would recognize that as well. Yeah, I'd love to actually maybe open that up to Mark and Gio. I mean, we live in a world where there's a lot of like potential male mentorship, right? You mentioned Tony Robbins there earlier, and there's lots of like mini Tony Robbinses that will teach you, like there's motivation, but it's ultimately very like money centric, and a lot of that stuff is. Then you've got like obviously sort of like male influencers of a range of palatability and a range of like health. But it does seem that like, I guess, how have you seen, Gio and Mark, how have you seen sort of like the level of male mentorship shift and change in this, crazy new social media world that we have? Maybe I'll start with you, Gio, as an internet celebrity yourself.
Well, thanks for that. I'm an internet household name only in my own house. I think that first of all, I think there again that we have kind of, as a society, overlooked our elders and not have the utmost respect for them, and trying to gain knowledge from them. And if you can talk to any 80-year-old man, sit down with them, they'll be glad to talk to you. And they will. It's only a matter if you have enough time for them. I mean, they just want to talk. So, but it's really us, and I say as a society, I'm super curious myself with older men because I think they have wisdom, right? If nothing else, they've lived 80, 85, 90 years, right? That alone, experience alone. Forget about research and all that, right? So I think that I just don't think that the younger generation, are care about that as much, and as a society we don't value it as much. I do think that that's the way to go. I do think that I've already positioned myself in such a way, at 51 already, a 20-year-old, I have a couple of things to say. We've lived a couple of years and research, life, done it, messed up again, figured it out, sometimes not figure it out. These are things that helps the next generation of boys to men become better men. And I think that's a very important role that we have. This notion of how can these young men, Dallas was talking about his 11-year-old son. I wish we were neighbors because, Dallas, very well that if I want to have impact on my son, the best way is to have a group of older men that think alike, right? After a certain point, we're white noise to them.
Absolutely.
Hey, do this, right? Hey, Dallas, do me a favor, tell Leo to, and you'll tell him exactly what I've told him, and you'll have better impact, vice versa, right? So I think that, and I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but I think that the reason for that is because the conversation, how can we raise younger men to be younger boys to be better men is a very important conversation. I'm not liking what I'm seeing. I'm not liking what I'm seeing with millennials, particularly. Overall, they have great concepts, work-life balance, love it. But a lot of them are, honestly, from my perspective, I have family members and nephews who are in the basement playing video games or ordering Uber Eats. They don't go to the gym. They're not making good money. And so they're single. And this is without AI at its peak. Once AI is at its peak, they're not even going to need a relationship because they're going to have a robot there to do whatever they want to do with. So I'm really concerned about that. And I think it's very important for us to have these conversations and really mentor these younger men as listen, stop, drop the joystick and get in the gym and let's think business, think relationships, and think your body, your mind, and you're going to live a richer life. These guys don't even know how to approach, and just to keep it in a heterosexual situation, they don't know how to approach a young lady. My son just came from camp. He just arrived yesterday from sleepaway camp. First thing he told me was, I asked this girl out to the prom and she turned me down. Great. High five. You asked the girl out. Great. Yeah. You gotta work that muscle on asking. And yep, they didn't work. I need to try a different strategy or up my game as a male. And that's a wonderful part of being a male. So yeah, I think there is mentorship is important. I think is overlooked. And I think we do have an opportunity with what sounds like Dallas, with the kind of work you're doing to change that around quite a bit.
Can I ask you, Gio, one thing that's come up I read this week was just that, for a long time, maybe 10 years ago, you'd say, oh, cancer's going up. And they'd say, well, it's just people are getting older. And so we're discovering them. And now you're seeing now younger people are getting cancers at a higher rate than their parents, right? And, I'd love to just talk about that with regard to men's health, because I've had guys that I went to school with, and I'm 43 now, over the last 10 years, there's been some wild health stuff that I wouldn't associate with men of that age historically. Can you just share from your perspective what's happening in sort of like an environmental way? Is it just transgenerational epigenetics where it's just like finally catching up with that next generation? Or do you think, the sort of toxicity paired with lifestyle has just got consistently worse? Is there something that we're missing?
I think the answer is yes, James.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to stay in my wheelhouse here because the only cancer that I really see is prostate cancer. I don't see much more than that. Right. And what I am seeing is younger men, and younger is defined in the world of prostate cancer. Any man younger than 60 really, but even younger than 50. So my definition is younger than 50, 45, 46, 47 years old, which is unheard of. Being diagnosed with prostate cancer, but not only being diagnosed with prostate cancer, being diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer in that younger population. So that's happening. I dabble in testicular cancer quite a bit just because of the nature of my work. I think there's more of that happening. When you start looking at semen analysis, you see the unhealthy parameters of sperm and sperm cells, which contributes to or is associated with testicular cancer. And then you ask the question, why is that? I don't know the actual that's been looked at objectively from a statistical and research perspective. But hell, you see what you see, and I love looking at patterns. And I'm saying, well, if I'm wrong, but the patterns are there. What are the patterns that I see? Is all the things that you mentioned. Actually, there's an epigenetic element that seems to be more serious. There's more xenoestrogens and fake and environmental hormonal elements to it, estrogenic elements that we're more exposed to more than ever before. And this wonderful world of the internet and digital devices, which is how we're communicating now, and it could be so great for us, it's also a problem where too easy, I always say one of the biggest problems that young men have these days is too much easy access to pornography, right? So a lot of erectile dysfunction has to do, in younger population, has to do, in my opinion, to excess porn watching, for example. So couple that with staying up later than usual and not getting, sleep is still overlooked. And it's like, well, I'll sleep when I die kind of mentality, which is one of the most important things to do to, rejuvenate, and recover from day-to-day things for testosterone production as well, right? So it's the digital, it's the environmental, is all combined that then leads to behaviors of things like poor sleep. I know for me, I love waking up in the morning and working out in the morning. If I'm not sleeping well, I'd rather sleep in and then not work out in the morning. Well, if you say that every day, then you're not working out and you're not sleeping and so forth. And if you're not sleeping well, that leads to, eating worse foods and things like that. So it's a cycle there. But I think it's all of the above, James. I do. And I think that the digital, the way we live now digitally, again, there's a good side. Look where we are at, but it's been a problem. And it's been a problem in learning. There's no playbook. How do you manage this? Right? How do you manage the whole thing? Right? These younger millennials who were born with iPads, they literally cannot detach. Right? One of the things I love about sleepaway camps and kids is that they completely detach for 4 weeks. They have zero access to any technology, including speaking to their parents by phone for 4 weeks. So more of these things are important. But I'm interested in hearing Mark and Dallas's opinion on that.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, whether it's sperm counts, whether it's fertility rates, and NHANES data, national worldwide data now on testosterone levels. The World Health Organization is in a bit of a panic, saying what is going on? We're seeing now, not just in certain countries, but all over the world, these same trends. So this is a global problem. And whether it's endocrine disrupting chemicals, whether it's the digital, I agree with everything Gio's saying. It's all of it. It's all of it. I don't think it's like cancer etiologies. It's been very elusive because it's not one smoking gun. It's multiple guns aimed at us. One of the things I would say in my own practice, though, that I've noticed is with patterns of androgen deficiency, it appears to be a part of a bigger syndrome. We talk about metabolic syndrome having these criteria with cardiometabolic diseases. My experience has been that these younger, sicker patients have cardiometabolic diseases, fatty livers, inflammatory processes that are bringing into question causation versus simple association with low T. And this is the thing that a lot of these andrologists and endocrinologists are really wrestling with is it an association, as you would look at some of the clinical data? Some of the epidemiologic observational data is saying, man, this is really strong for overall and cardiovascular mortality, and not just testosterone. We're looking at DHEA, we're looking at estrogen levels in the context of cognitive health, in the context of pain, neuroplasticity, sexual health, of course. But I'm seeing these patterns of hyperinflamed, autoimmune, centrally obese, younger males that are having problems with ED at rates that I've never seen in 35 years of practice. I haven't seen adolescent males with Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroid at the rates that I'm seeing now. And it's not that our genes have changed. The question you raise, could it be the transgenerational epigenetic effects that we're seeing, these moms that are exposed to stress and cortisol and horrific environments these fetuses are experiencing in utero, are we reaping the whirlwind finally from an endocrinologic phenotype? I think absolutely. But when I see guys, I'm looking at patterns of low T. Is it inflammation? Is it stress and cortisol problems? Is it toxicity? Is it cardiometabolic? When you look at these associations, you have to take it all into consideration. So I'm a big proponent of including low testosterone of a secondary nature anyway, along with the syndromes of things like metabolic syndrome for sure, even though they're not part of the official criteria. In my mind, they might as well be, because the associations are as high as dyslipidemia, hypertension, obesity, and glucose dysregulation.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to get a little bit of like clinical stuff in, because ultimately I think what we've been talking about is like the bigger picture of how we've ended up here. And I think that there's definitely, you know, some good news, and maybe that's where we can end up here is like for all of you. Maybe I'll start with you, Dallas. Where are some things that you see green shoots of a journey in the other direction? I mean, obviously there's a lot that's going on that is like tragic and painful and sad and harrowing, but are there green shoots that you see out in the men you're working with, or in trends in society that make you think that you know, that there's sort of like a revolution underway? It's just at the very beginning and we can't really see it yet.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly quiet revolution, but I do think it's happening. I think even the fact that we're having this conversation and that I got to be on this call and chime in about sort of, you know, less clinical stuff, sort of soft science stuff, is evidence that people are interested in and open to some of these ideas. And, you know, I think this, again, by nature of men being less interested in being really glitzy and showy about and very public about what's going on with them, I think you'll see it less in, you know, in public on social media and on mainstream media. But I think it is happening, and it's happening because I look at my peers, I look at my friends, and I look at men that I work with, and they are recognizing that things need to change, and they're excited to do that. And I think the next hurdle for us as a group is figuring out what tools work best and finding enough resources to help all of us find our way. But I do think that there is some really promising changes, you know, going on. Even the fact that men can now talk about having depression and anxiety is something that didn't happen 20 years ago. So there are things slowly changing bit by bit, but I think there's a larger change afoot that is obvious on the internet.
Yeah. Gio, what do you see that's hopeful for you?
You know, I do think, as much as sometimes I sound like I'm knocking the younger generation, I think there's hope with them as well, because they also think differently and with respects to work-life balance. I believe that Gen X is the generation after the millennials, if I get that right, or am I a Gen X? I what's the generation after the millennials? Is it X?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What is it? Z?
Well, Z's the newest one, right?
Yeah, right. So the Zers, the older group is like 27, 26 at this point. And they're health conscious. They don't really drink much, for example. And I do think that alcohol has been a huge problem in the history of mankind, literally the gender mankind, and overconsumption. And they don't drink much. Like millennials drink a lot more. I saw some statistics on that. They drink a whole lot less. So that's why you have now mocktails everywhere, right? Anywhere you go, they'll create a mocktail. So I find a lot of hope there. And I do think that generation, potentially the older group, is interested in looking for elders, looking for someone to teach them the way. And I do see that in the males of that generation. So I'm hopeful that, again, it's not about being motivated or trying to motivate them. Already motivated men looking for resources like the ones that we're discussing here. And I think I'm optimistic that there's more of that going on now.
Yeah. Mark, thoughts on your end?
Yeah, agree very much. I think finding that that balance, right, between being hyper focused on materialism and financial success, which brings about hyper cortisolemic states and just trashes our bodies. Testosterone being included in that. Well, I always say that cortisol is kryptonite to your sex hormones and your anabolic hormones in particular. But then finding that mix with a healthy motivation, and not being in your basement just gaming and giving up on the rest of the world, but combining that this wonderful young inspiring group of folks that is cognizant of the environment, more so than even my generation for sure. I really respect these kids, and I celebrate the fact that they care at a level beyond where my generation did. I think that finding these mentors that can bring balance and wisdom from the generations before and overlay it on some of these new insights that the younger generation has is going to be key. And then also celebrating the differences between men and women as opposed to polarizing and solving the problem that women have had with suppression and oppression by men, as opposed to becoming men and doing it back to us. Wow, wouldn't it be a fantastic thing to do something different and do it correctly and do it lovingly in a service way? We as men have dropped the ball in the way we have led, and we've lost our way in some circles, you could certainly argue. And the statistics with abuse and sexual abuse that women have endured is absolutely staggering. But my call to action would be, instead of doing what we did to them as a female side, help us find our manhood, be part of our solution as opposed to alienating and relegating us to being testosterone poisoned baggage that needs to be vanquished, sent out the airlock, proverbial airlock. I think we both have a reason to celebrate our differences and find a way forward that is more human, mostly human, as opposed to gender driven.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, look, I want to thank all of you and your participation. I guess I want to finish with a few ideas of my own. So, earlier this year, Dallas and I have been talking. I've seen so much value in the men's group that I've been part of, right? My health has improved, my mental health, my emotional health has all improved through something that is not medical. And one of the interesting things that's happened actually recently is people being referred into the group by medical professionals, either therapists who are like, I think we've reached as far as we could go here, and maybe this is going to serve you better. But one of the things that we started to look at was to document all of the different men's groups that were going on, and it was actually quite exciting to see this sort of the beginning of a mature men's movement, I would say. Coming where there's lots of different leadership. There's lots of different like styles. There are some that are faith-based, some that are exercise-based, some that are the one that I'm part of is sort of like Jungian. There's some Native American parts to it too. So like there's different niches and people wanting to start those and build those. So I see that as a green shoot, because I just feel like more and more people people younger than myself looking for in-person connection with men, looking for ritual, looking for that something more than what they see out on TV or anything like that. And so I'm excited to see what's possible there. And my encouragement to any clinician that's watching this is to, if nothing else, just get to know what's going on in your area. If there are those kind of groups, like you recommending something to a man who comes in who needs that kind of help, if a doctor had recommended that to me and I had found this, I would be forever indebted, to you for sending me in that direction. So I think there's we've always encouraged to be at the center of your community as a practitioner, to quarterback care. And I think maybe the first thing is just to go out and see what's there and get to know the groups of people that are doing it. And I think that'd be an amazing first step. Guys, I'm really thankful. I know particularly Gio, we haven't spoken for a long time, but I know you're still the man, and I'm really grateful that you came and showed up the way you did today. And I really appreciate your still there on the front lines, doing your thing and making an impact in not only the circle of men that you treat, but also, beyond. Mark, I want to just honor like the length of our friendship, and now you going after what really matters to you and doing that. And Dallas, look, I really think that the world is ready for what you're here to provide. And I know you've got a lot going on, but I'm here in service to allowing that to come into the world, because I think the time is right for everything that you are looking to bring into the world. So I'm grateful for our friendship as well. Mark, you want to say something?
Oh no, I just wanted to say I wish I could clone Dallas, because we've got all these wonderful biochemical practitioners with clinical knowledge, and what we need are folks like him with his knowledge that can come as part of the treatment team, and it would just be gold, man. That would be gold.
Well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. We weren't talking about actually cloning, but it wasn't far off. So, but yeah, you're in the right position. But you're right. Look, there's only a limited amount of stuff that we can do in a clinic, right? In an office, in medicine. If everything else that we've learned tonight is that there is a psychosocial piece that is the majority of the work that needs to be addressed, and I'm excited to see, what is arising to meet those needs. So thank you, Mark. Thanks for saying that. Thank you all for your participation, men and women, and everyone who's watching. Thank you so much. I'm not sure, this has been a long time coming. We haven't had this kind of conversation on the evolution of medicine, but I'd love to hear your feedback. If this was interesting, if this was inspiring, if you have a man that you think you can send this to, that this might be interesting. If you're sitting there at home and saying, hey, maybe there is a potential for a really sophisticated, interesting men's health clinic in my city. If that's you and you're thinking about that now, get in touch. I'd love to, share some of the tools and resources that I think could go into a really sophisticated men's health clinic with a strong psychosocial piece to it. But this is a green shoot that we're having this conversation. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been the evolution of medicine. This is the Functional Forum.